morning, Mark Orang here, publisher of The Sun, and today my guest is Mark Hounsell.
Good to see you, Mark.
How you doing, Mark?
I'm well. I'm well.
So, Mark, you've announced and you're leaving politics and community involvement after 48 years.
Yep.
So we're going to get to that.
Yeah.
But let's get to the issues first.
Sure.
Right, okay. So last week was the budget, the Marathon Budget Committee hearing of 7.5 hours.
It's a thing of beauty. No, really.
Yeah, for the 5 people who left, who were there.
Well, more could have come.
Yeah.
But the thing about it is that, to me, has become more valuable than the deliberative session. And the reason for that is no one has made the final decision other than the selectmen, but the budget committee hasn't formalized anything. And although it kind of turned into an extension of another budget committee meeting, it wasn't meant to do that. It's a hearing where the budget committee can hear from the public before they make their recommendations. And that is an opportunity. I think about it afterwards, that's really a good way to make the deliberative portion, which I think is disgustingly poor, irrelevant, because by practice it is. But if people come out for the budget hearing and say what they need to say, the budget committee needs to listen, not talk, but listen. That's why I preface everything I said to, I'm speaking to be heard, I'm not here to debate.
I appreciate that, but and we're going to talk about the Charter Commission at some point, but it makes a case for the Charter Commission because people don't go to 7.5 hour public hearings.
I disagree with that 100%.
And we'll get there because I know that. But at the budget, I thought one of the most fascinating things that came out was Ryan O'Connor, who's our new town planner.
Yeah, excellent job too.
Excellent, he's doing excellent. By the way, do you know what percentage, what state, Ryan O'Connor is an Irish name, right?
I would say.
Yeah. What state in the country has the highest percentage of Irish and Irish descendants as a percentage? What state?
I'm going to say because of Boston, Massachusetts.
New Hampshire.
No kidding.
20%.
No kidding.
Yeah, Mass is a little bit behind, but we're number 1.
Okay.
Yeah, so anyway.
Good.
So Ryan fits right into 20%
yeah,
of
make
us.
St. Patrick's Day that much more.
And we have a green screen.
In the green.
Yeah, there we go. Which people can't see, but it's a green screen here. Anyway, so he's floating this idea where if a developer developed or built affordable housing, they would basically get a break on their property taxes for X number of years, right?
Right.
And that started a discussion. I thought this was fascinating that Bill Marvel, who's Mr. Anti-Development, basically said, why do we want to do that? Because all it's going to do is attract more people.
Right.
So it gets to a couple of questions because all this affordable housing is supposed to be for locals. So the first thing is, how do you even define a local these days? Now you're a local because you're many generations. I've been here 35 years, but I'm a New Hampshire native, but not here.
You're a local. People who live here are locals. What you're describing is natives, people who were born and raised here. I'm a native,
right? But
we're both locals. So locals are locals. Bill was born in Virginia, but people might think he's his native. But then again, his father's from here. So there's all that. But it really shouldn't be looked at that way. I think the way it should be looked at is people who live here, resident locals, and people from away who come here on secular homes or visiting and whatnot. And so to the sense that we live here, we're all locals.
But you got up in one of the meetings that I was attended and talked about how the strip is out of control and it's not like it way. Yeah. But the thing is with affordable housing, and while I don't agree with Bill on this, I certainly understand that sentiment because and it makes sense because if you have more affordable housing, that's just going to bring more people in to live in the affordable housing and then they become locals.
Bill becomes, he's just very good at being consistent with his arguments and finding yet another way of expressing it. He's not wrong on this. What he does is he points out what are we going to do with Conway. People are going to move here whether this article passes or not. So really what we want to do is plan. plan for them coming.
So you're not against, I mean, you're a native, you can't be any more native than you, Mark.
Right.
I mean, how many generations you been here?
I have 12.
12, okay, so, you know, and so if you have every 20 years, so that's what, 240 years, maybe?
1629, so here, I don't know.
Okay, whatever.
We're
but,
here
I mean,
now.
what do you think about the idea of just growth in general before we get to the specifics? Like, when is enough enough? Or is enough ever enough?
I think enough was in 1970. Oh, I'm serious. I think if we were serious about planning in the early 70s, we could have avoided a lot of the what I'll call damage that has been done. And I think that's what the strip does. It's a reflection of our unawareness to incorporate zoning planning. I don't think people remember the histories well enough, but 1978, there was an article that passed that created the planning board, and it also created zoning.
Because before that, we had
Nothing.
literally no zoning.
No,
you could have a business.
We were
and
like
a residential
Clarksville,
zone.
New Hampshire. You'd build anything you want, anytime you
In
want.
Tamworth, actually.
Yeah, Tamworth.
Right.
So in 78, there was a move, and it was voted on by the public to have a planning board. Those who objected to it at the time included the selectmen and some businessmen and a judge or two and lawyers. And they noted that the notice for that article hadn't been posted properly. And so it was held that that vote wasn't legal. And so there was a suit to sue the town for having the planning board. And they had an election, and my brother Jay was actually elected. And so these people sued Jay, my brother Jay. Personally. And the town wouldn't defend him. And so he had Alan Shea. And so anyways, it held...
Lawyer Alan Shea.
Yep. So it held on for a year or so, and they put it back on the article correctly in 79, and it passed. And so in 1979 is when we really stepped into doing planning in the town of Conway.
And at that time, we just separated residential from commercial.
Yeah, it was like anything. You got to walk before you can run. And I think a lot of people can be critical of missteps, but I think it's easy to be critical of people who had the job to do at the time with what they had to work with. So as the planning developed and zoning developed, you had animosities and agreements about, you know, property rights and whatnot. And people went on the board and left the board, and the board developed into something that was there when Tom Irving came. Now, Tom Irving entry into the planning of this town,
which was in probably the mid-2000s.
2000. I was on the board.
2000?
Yeah, I was on the board of select my first term when we hired him, just before we hired Earl Sayers.
Okay.
So Tom Irving, he was here, what, 20 some odd years. And he and Holly Whitelaw, they kind of built the planning department. And they did this with the planning boards, which was coming and going and different ideas and different things. And we developed zoning. And to the degree that they had to wrestle so much, I think they did a darn good job. But that brings us to today.
But let's go back for a second. So if you said it should have stopped in 1970, I think you're also referring just the aesthetics and the type of businesses we have on the strip.
I think if we had better planning in the early 70s, we wouldn't have the strip that we have now.
But a magic wand would be what? I mean, not allow franchises, for instance, not allow big hotels? Like, what could be done more or less with a commercial strip than what we have?
Well, that goes back into the thing that doesn't make sense, a lot like what Bill's saying. You know, people are coming, people are going to do what they do. I guess what I'm talking about is growing up. I was 18 in 1970, and the town was different. There was North Conway, and there was Conway, and there was a difference, and there was a acknowledgement of that distance. We knew where the bump in the road was at the Bull and Alley Hill. That strip represents now, I guess, fond memories of people like myself, natives, who can remember when it wasn't like it is, and is more preferable.
But you know, what's interesting about that is that people say, You know, oh, that big hotel, it's, you know, the one that's right on the road.
That's awful.
That's awful. Okay, you can't see the moats. It's awful.
You can't see it. It's just in many different ways it's awful.
Okay, so, and I don't disagree with that. But when you drive up the Strip, and I was looking at this after that, and you say that, like the North Conway Motel, you can't see the moats from there either because it blocks the view.
I know.
You know, so, you know, back in the 40s and 50s when all those, which are well kept and they're really nice, I'm not saying that, but back in the 40s and 50s when they were developed, was the generation before that saying, oh my gosh, the Strip's gone to hell because we get these motels, these Strip motels here.
Well, you know, there's that side of it, but the side really, I would say, is emotionally damaging to me, which is not a good reason. Your emotion's just another way of telling a story. But we don't have Howard Johnson's. We do, you know, Green Granite's there, it's changed. We don't have the airport. We don't have the drive-in theater. Now, of course, those weren't going to last, of course. But I'm not really all that keen on what they've become. They look so out of place from what we have here. And my big concern now, and I hope the voters see this, is that the north-south local road should be a parkway because there is a stretch of road. It's not very long, but where it preserves the way Conway used to look. And if that overlay district is accepted, we can protect that view shed over Puddin Pond and into conservation, and we can also not be bothered by the looks of development on the west side. We'd protect the view shed. That's why I really object to Barsamian's proposal to put a big housing project for out-of-staters who can only afford it that will be an overlook. And
no, but we're talking.
So that becomes what happened on the Strip, now morphing into the Parkway, and that is enough. I really hope that doesn't
We're talking
happen.
about Rob Barsamian, who's the developer of Settlers Green and all that stuff.
Yeah,
and
he's an example of landmonger. You know, they take, develop, and give nothing.
Well, I mean, they pay a lot of taxes.
They pay a lot of taxes, but they pass it on to their.
They employ a lot of people.
Here's what they think.
They don't have.
Barsamian doesn't pay any taxes. Ronald Reagan said it right. Consumers pay taxes.
Well, he
doesn't pay taxes. He makes money. And he makes money off land.
My guess is that his property, he pays a lot of taxes and property taxes. Settlers Green pays a lot of taxes as property tax.
Yeah, but they collect it from the consumers that are doing business
but that's
there.
the way it works. You know, and he probably makes money, and whatever he makes, he pays personally. But anyway,
I don't believe he pays property taxes. I believe he collects the taxes and transfers them to the town. And everyone in business does that. I don't think businesses, they pass it through. Okay, we're going to collect your rent, and from that rent, we're going to take a portion of it that we've charged you and give it to the town.
Yeah, that's what employees are in the same boat. They work their butts off, and they got to pay the town's taxes. Is that any less or more fair?
What do you mean they work their butts off?
Well, you work anybody who owns anybody who owns a house.
Anyone that rents a house.
Yeah.
Everyone that rents.
So there's a consumption tax. I mean, whatever you want to call it, we happen to do it through property tax. But getting back to the overlay district, I just want to be clear what we're talking about here. The old racquetball club, which was on Barnes Road, right?
Yeah.
So most people don't even know what that is because it's a dust pile now. Right. But when you go past Home Depot, and instead of taking a right around on McMillan Way, I guess. If you go straight to a dead end, that used to be the old racquetball club.
Right.
That's where he's proposing to put in X number of condo units, whatever it is. 5 buildings. Now, the overlay district, so this is a new overlay.
Not for people in town.
Well, who knows?
I do. You do, too. Those things are going to sell for the same amount of money Cranmore sell in their condos, and they're not going to be available to people who work at Walmart.
And why shouldn't he be able to build those?
I'm not saying he shouldn't be able. I'm saying he shouldn't be able to. I'm just saying he shouldn't. He should have a sensitivity to what we have in Conway, and it isn't all about taking every square foot so that you can make money. Set those buildings back, protect the view shed.
Well, I think the planning board suggested, well, a couple of questions. One is the overlay district, the new overlay district. There used to be an overlay district on the north-south road, and that was voted out, I think, when that area where the PetSmart is and the Tractor Supply, that was removed.
Right.
So now we have a new overlay district. And what I don't know, you can tell me, where is that thing?
2005, the selectmen designated that that road, North-South Road, was going to be a parkway. But that's just words. Now we're talking that this is going to be a parkway with definitions, and there's going to be an overlay. And in those overlays, you're not going to be able to infringe upon the view shed. I don't know, I can't remember, because I'm getting older, exactly how many feet that is, but it's on the warrant. There is a map, and it's part of the master plan. And it's a wonderful thing, because it preserves something that doesn't need to be developed. But the state has a project through the Housing Finance Authority, and they're working with the town to make sure that they can build these housing units and not disrupt the view shed on that land. It's how it should work. That was put together with the help of Joe Kenny, Jeb Bradley, the Commissioner of DOT, town staff, a selectmen, the planning board. There's a development that's going to bring 160 housing units to the New Hampshire Housing Finance Authority that Jack Cuddy worked to help get this all established. And they're working with the town to make sure that everyone's going to be satisfied that that land will be put to use and will be able to protect it. Now, the Settlers Green project comes in, totally disregard it. I have a right to build this obnoxious building because
well, you think it's obnoxious. A lot of people don't think it's obnoxious.
It's obnoxious in that a lot of people will. When we have this one strip of road where we don't have to look at a development, and his will be the one that we have to look at.
I'm not sure.
That is rude and it's obnoxious, in my opinion.
Oh no, but the planning board. No, just so we put it in perspective here, that the Barsamian piece is there that we just described by the Racquetball Club. In back of sort of Home Depot is what you're talking about. There are two big parcels of land.
No, this is where the old condos were. This is to the south of the racquetball.
Right, where the yellow condos
Yeah, those are coming down, and that's where the state is going to put housing
But there
units.
are two pieces of land.
And then on the other side of the racquetball is the other piece of land.
Right.
All right, and so all of those are going to be worked together because they can take credit from the state land for density.
Right.
And so they can put in more units, and those units can be constructed so that they're not visible from the north-south
All right.
parkway.
Well, the planning board, though, asked Barsamian, and he agreed to put a berm so you couldn't see him.
He didn't agree. They said that we need to have one.
Well,
he didn't agree to it. No, he didn't.
He did. Our story said he did.
Well, your story wasn't what was said at the planning board. Until you get all these things down on paper and have a drawing, there's no agreement.
Right.
What there was is severe objection from the planning board for that. That building could be set back. There could be a berm. I don't think that will do the job. But the point isn't that. The point is, when is it that going to be when developers understand that not every square inch of this town should be used for development so that they can make more money at the expense of us?
I don't think it's up to me or you to make that decision.
No, I guess it probably isn't, but it's up to me.
If someone wants to have a mom and pop hotel, they can do that. Someone put an extra restaurant, another restaurant, I know. So I guess I just philosophically just disagree that Rob Barsamian's a bad guy because he wants to develop.
I'm not saying he's a bad guy. He's a great guy.
Well, no, I don't mean personally.
I'm talking on this. There's two types of people in this conversation: the givers and the takers. The takers are obvious. This is taking advantage of a law that he has with a disregard for the impact of the people who have to suffer from it.
How people going to suffer from a few
Having to drive along this beautiful parkway that reminds you of the way things used to be and have to look up and see yet another one of his projects.
Well, one is that, how high is that going to be, do you know?
It's 35 feet.
But it's set back.
No, it isn't set back. If it was set back, it would make it, he can do it. Now, mine is just an objection as a planning board member, of which I'm not now. I'm just a citizen. Right? Yeah, I'm not.
So now you can speak your mind like you haven't before.
Well, yeah, so on the strip, what I did is recuse myself so I could speak my mind as a citizen, and that's what I think people should do. It doesn't matter if I'm right or wrong. Right. It just matters how I feel. And I think in this instance, I'm speaking on behalf of a lot of people who feel the same way.
Yeah, I think because of the overlay.
I'm not saying he doesn't have a legal right.
Well, you're just saying he's morally wrong. That he has
I'm
an
not even saying that. I'm saying he's being rude.
You're saying he has an obligation. I don't think he does.
Oh, I think every one of us have an obligation to be a giver over
Well,
being
no,
a
you have to
taker.
be. You have to. It is an obligation to be a responsible corporate citizen and a private citizen for sure. But as he said, any sort of housing helps the housing situation. And I agree with that.
That's not true. That is not true at all. Not at least bit. That housing situation actually, I would say, makes it worse because yet another piece of inventory that's not available, another draw of people into the area to take up whatever else is available to them or not to us.
Yeah.
I agree with Bill Marvel on this point. There is that part of the argument that remains, is that if you don't control your development, you will have things like everyone taking advantage of what they can do under property rights with a disregard for the rest of us. So Bill isn't wrong on that.
No, well, Bill isn't wrong. I think what I understand Bill to say is that he just doesn't want more people. And I understand that.
And
Actually,
what I say, you can't stop them from coming.
Right.
They're going to come anyways.
Right.
This is a wonderful place to be.
Meanwhile, you're the one who voted against the petition that I spearheaded on short-term rentals.
Broke my heart to do that.
Well, you didn't have to.
Well, I did, because when you take an oath of office, it says in accordance with the laws of the state of New Hampshire. That was obvious to me, became obvious to me that that was not in accordance with the laws of the state of New Hampshire.
Well, that's because someone told you that. That's because
someone didn't tell me. Someone convinced me.
Right.
You know me
I don't
long
mean
enough. No one tells me what to do.
I'll take that back. Someone convinced you, town council convinced you, and Eliza Grant and a few others, that there were holes in that. And the counter to that is, I think the planning board, the selectmen are just they're just afraid about going to another court case so they could lose.
I'm not.
Well,
I'm not. I was willing to go to the mat on the casino. And that was what, a $10 million gun to our head?
Yeah.
No, I've never. You check me. I have never backed down.
Well, you chose to believe town council and Eliza.
On this one, I believe they were right, and I could not develop an argument.
Well, you listened to Chris Meyer, who developed the ordinance, and he says it's going to stand.
But he didn't convince me. Here's the thing. I was hoping he was right, and I believed that he was, and I wanted that shield.
But it's easy how it got defeated, or why you guys voted against it, because it gets very technical. It's RSA this, RSA that, and so it's not on the concept you guys are against.
It was the RSA.
It was the RSA.
Right.
And Chris says the exact opposite. He thinks it can stand.
All right, so here's the thing about lawyers. They're going to argue because that's what they do. They argue law, they argue points of law, and the judicial process is available to people who can afford it. It's about money. So lawyers, I hold them all in the best one is a good from a bad bunch. Here's the thing. I know how to read RSAs. I have written RSA. I study RSAs. I'm not a lawyer, but I'm real careful about what the law says and what it provides for. Having heard Chris, having heard town council, having heard the argument, I could not come up with a contrary argument to put my feet on is saying this is in accordance with the law.
Well, I just think you guys just kind of got nervous about going to another lawsuit, and I don't blame you because the town loses lawsuits all the time. But I just think
we win some too.
Huh?
We win some too.
Well, I don't know when last time, but this is one we have a good shot at. And the other nuance of this thing is about this whole grandfathering thing. So I would argue is that because we had the deadline to register rentals, that you could make the case, which if it ever passed, and I'm hoping people are going to support this thing. So never mind all the arguments about the RSA in the weed stuff, but you could make the case that everything, the grandfathering stops and starts at January 26th. In other words, if short-term rentals and long-term rentals didn't register, which they were supposed to do, is that those are the only ones that would be grandfathered.
So I'll leave it at this. It is a petitioned article that has strong support from some very capable people. My recommendation to the voters is don't vote for it because it is not solid on law. But I have no more to say about that. I think I fulfilled my duty and obligation, my fiduciary obligation as a member of the planning board, not to put the town in a jeopardized position with my recommendation. But I'll also say if it passes, it wouldn't break my heart.
All right. Well,
I didn't kowtow to legal pressure, or political pressure, or anything.
No.
I saw it for what it is. It is not a I think, a successful battle.
Well, I just think it's, I have to admit, I was really surprised. I mean, I respect the planning board, you know that. And
I know,
a lot of
you were very gracious with your comments.
Yeah, I know. That's what, that was my mouth. My head was saying, what are you guys, crazy?
I know how that works. Yeah, I know.
You know, but I just think it's worth a shot. I just think Chris Myers is a very competent lawyer. He's been studying this stuff forever, and it's worth a shot. And as Eric Corbett says, hey, even if it fails, you can learn something from it and get control of it. Because you talk about, you know, people taking advantage like Rob Arsamian. I just think, well, I have no issue with him because he's a commercial developer in a commercial district. I do have an issue with the investors in residential neighborhoods. That is an issue.
Let me ask you something here. Should it pass, and it won't break my heart if it does, would you and Chris be willing to go before the planning board and tweak that part about that's objectionable to the law and tweak it so that it wouldn't be? In other words, would you admit that the law needs to have some polish to it?
Well, I'll answer it this way. Well, I'm not going to admit that it needs some polish to it because I'm not convinced that it needs it. However,
when you become convinced that it needs polish.
Yeah, if it needs polish, that would be the obvious thing to do, and I think Chris would, if he could be convinced of that. But I don't think he's convinced of it. I don't think he's convinced of it at all. But anyway, all right. So I think we're running out of time, Mark. We've got like 19 more issues to talk about. Anything more? Let's just wrap up the budget stuff. About the school, just overall, we got 2 or 3 minutes. What do you think about the school budget? I mean, what do you think about the budget process that's going through? And I think everyone was surprised that the budget committee didn't recommend a $2 million cut.
I think the budget committee this year showed some real sagacity. I think the wisdom of their work came forward with their recommendations.
What do you think they did right?
I think what they did is they had the discussions, they listened, and they didn't force things. They developed rationales for their positions.
Like what?
Well, they were 12-0 to ask the school board to reduce their budget. That you don't see 12-0 votes very often on budget committees, and that started the conversation going further. And so when it came down to it, I think their wise decision, instead of having a floor fight with the deliberative, which will be flooded with teachers and pro-school people, and the budget committee would once again lose the argument, they're just saying to the voters, we don't recommend this budget. And so that's going to make it interesting for the November 9th vote, because people at that point are going to, without the benefit of really any deliberations or any contrary vote, they're going to be voting on either the school board's budget or the default budget. And if they get the default budget, it'll show that the way that the planning board has developed their recommendation panned out to what they really want to see.
Right. Well, this year, and just again to fill in the blanks there, for the first time that I can remember, the default budget, because we always have 2 budgets, the default budget is actually $1 million less than the proposed budget. So by voting for the default budget this time, people actually get a quote-unquote a budget cut.
Does this say how much time we have left?
Yeah, it does.
So let me
we got a minute and a half.
Let me say something about the school budget then. We got a minute and a half?
Yeah.
Oh, the school budget represents a dysfunctional school district. The planning board, the school board has told the superintendent, we don't hear your recommendations on the tuition contracts. They pushed an agenda that was driven by a desire to close a school instead of enhancing education. I do not believe that it was necessary to move in the direction that they moved, that requires that we do have to close a school because we can't afford it. It's not an improvement to education. They failed to look at the cuts they could have made at the high school, but those cuts would only return county taxpayers 50 cents on the dollar, where if you cut the elementary school, it's $1 saving to the taxpayers. The budget committee is there to represent the interests of the taxpayers. They're not there to influence the interests of the people, and the people I include children. The children, I believe, have been harmed by this move. I think the move to close a school, move the 6th grade is an unnecessary move, and I have a sense of sadness about it because it didn't have to happen. They're not negotiating with the sending districts. That's going to affect future revenues. The problems of the school district and the budgets and their spending is only going to increase next year, because in the years after, because we're going to start losing tuition money from sending districts.
Well, you could. That's another interesting point about there could be a downward cycle. For
Oh,
sure.
there is.
But
This is a race to the bottom.
Well,
for the
maybe
school
maybe
district.
not. But I
Yeah,
also would counter that by saying, as much as nobody wants their neighborhood school, if you can consolidate some of those services so we have 2 principals and not 3, and all that, we can put more money into programming and teachers to help the kids.
Yeah, let's see if that happens.
All right. Well, Mark, it's been a pleasure.
Oh, my pleasure.
right.
Thank you. We
Okay.
didn't get very far, but
Well, maybe next time.
all right. Right. Thank you. That was good, but geez.